think a lot of people assume that I am Vian. I am not. We have some things in common, but I think the differences are possibly greater than the similarities. As parents, we have the same kind of view of parenthood, but she likes to travel, I like to stay at home. She finds it difficult to settle down, I find it difficult to leave. And so, you know, we are not exactly the same in many ways. I think also she has a different view of relationships. She is generally quite mistrustful of relationships and finds it difficult to build them. And once she has moved on from a place, she doesn't go back. I am a person who tends to build relationships for life, and I go back all the time. In fact, arguably, I very rarely move forwards. So she and I, not twins, definitely. Well, in each of the books about Vian, she has confronted some aspect of her life or her past, which she's needed to confront. In Chocolat, she confronted her fear, which was, I think, a rather irrational fear of the church and of what it has meant to her life. And this has been based on aspects of her past, which she's had to come to terms with. In The Lollipop Shoes, she had to come to terms with being the parent of 2 children and needing to give them the sort of life that she hadn't had herself. And here in Peaches, she is having to look at going back, which is something that she doesn't do very often, and perhaps confronting the idea of rejection and aspects of her past that she doesn't want to look at. But she has matured. She is better at dealing than she used to be, although she is still better at helping other people than she is at helping herself. And she is still riddled with various fears about her children and what kind of life she has given them, and the guilt which is residual from her relationship with her mother, about perhaps not having given them the life she would have wanted for them. I think there's a great deal too much emphasis put on difference and what makes people different. I think that ultimately we are all different and we're also all the same. Vian had problems being different in Chocolat because she was a stranger. She was not somebody who went to church. She was a single woman with a child. In this book, she immediately takes the side of another single woman with a child who coincidentally happens to be living in her old chocolaterie, not because she is different, but because she recognizes herself only too well. This woman happens to be a Muslim, she happens to wear the veil, but the story is really very much about getting rid of the veils that we use to hide ourselves from the world and exploring what makes us the same as human beings and getting rid of the kind of perceptions of cosmetic difference that divide us. Well, I've been concerned with the themes of fasting and feasting for some time because I write about food as a kind of metaphor for life and for the way people interact and the emotional ramifications of food and family. Having written one book that was set during Lent, it seemed natural to progress, given that I was writing about a Muslim community, to a similar period of fasting and feasting that was Ramadan. And I wanted to, in some ways, to complete the circle that had been started with Chocolat by continuing the same theme but in a slightly different cultural context. Film of Chocolat, I was an interested spectator. I chose not to be too closely involved, although I was consulted and I was shown versions of the script. And I liked the end result just fine. It's not the same story as my book, but it's not so different as to make it impossible to connect with. And I had a great time with it. But I am a writer of books, not of movies, and so whether these things have an effect on me, I don't think they do. It was a fun ride. It would be nice to have another. But it is not something that I absolutely live for. And I think it's probably quite difficult to take that movie and now to make a sequel of it, given that they already gave Vian a happy ending, and Johnny Depp, and all the things that Hollywood likes to give to stories, and I didn't. And so I would think that if any of my books are ever made into films, this one is probably one of the least likely. Of course, somebody may wish to prove me wrong. That would be nice too. I think in the UK, as in elsewhere, there are a lot of female writers. I think actually they're in the majority. I'm not going to name any in particular, although there are a lot of very fine ones. But I don't make the distinction between male writers and female writers. I don't think that it's a useful thing to do, and I think if British critics made less of a distinction, then we would probably be in a more advanced situation than we are now. We have a situation in England whereby the prestigious prizes tend to go to men, and female writers, however good, are regarded as having a nice little hobby. I think once that attitude changes and people stop trying to make cheap assumptions about what women and what men think like, then I think generally the cause of literature will be very much advanced.